My name's Joe Ferla. I've been at Enable for little over 5 years now, working on just over 5.5. And I have held most of the customer facing positions here at Enable. Worked everywhere from our channel sales or account management, right when we made the switch to acquire Logic Now, to sales engineer, to partner success manager, to head nerd. I very happy I'm in this position now, as well. I get paid to educate and I get paid to learn, um, which is what I've liked most about my positions in the past. All right, so agenda for today. First off, what is operational efficiency? How does it apply to us in the IT services world? Um, and then how do we define, measure, and improve on our efficiencies? So jumping right in to what is operational efficiency? So operational efficiency is generally defined as the ratio of input to output of a business process, right? How much are you putting in and what are we getting out for the efforts that we have put in? So when we look at operational efficiency, we think of inputs as any pretty much finite resource that we have inside our organization. And then when we look at our outputs, we're going to be looking at these um, along the lines of uh, what are we gaining from this, right? Applying people and time to automation will push out more tickets closed, higher revenue, and a higher profit margin across your product suite, right? So judging everything that we see effort or labor in, okay, or resources in, and our output are our measurable items. And this will come much more into play when we look at our KPIs and how are we going to be measuring operational efficiency, right? But we'll get to that a little bit later. So keeping it nice and simple here. Now, how does this apply to us at internet service or IT service providers, right? When we look at our IT service providers, we're going to split them into three groups. We're going to have our bottom quartile, we're going to have our median two quartiles, and then we're going to have what we call best in class. We're going to start those three definitions with the EBITDA number. Now, not all MSPs use EBITDA, earnings before income, taxes, depreciation, and appreciation. Some MSPs use just a straight EBIT number, right? Because let's be honest, there's not many resources we have as MSPs that depreciate or appreciate, right? So when we look at these three groups of our four quartiles, we look at the bottom quartile EBITDA number at roughly minus 0.3. Okay, not quite breaking even. We look at our two median quartiles at about 8.7% profit, and we look at our best in class at 18.4% profit and up. Okay. Now, profit here being a driver, because let's all be honest, we always want our MSPs to be more profitable. But as we go through this presentation, please keep these quartiles in mind as well, because a lot of what we're going to be talking about is going to be designed to push you up a quartile or a group of quartiles, right? So maybe a simpler way to view these three groups rather than EBITDA numbers is going to be sheer net profit. When we look at net profit across our MSPs, we see our bottom quartile is averaging a $6,000 loss year over year. Our median two quartiles are seeing a net profit of roughly 175K. And then our best in class are at that roughly 370K net profit, right? So anything that can push us up in those quartile numbers can equate to across $2 million worth of revenue, anywhere from 200 to 175K in profit growth, right? Or at least as we see ourselves jump those quartiles. Okay. And what we see across these quartiles, and the reason we're breaking them up like this, is we're seeing a very direct correlation to EBITDA numbers to operational efficiency. Right. And I think it goes without saying, the more efficient you are, the more money you're going to make. Right. That seems very simple. And it seems like a very easy correlation to make. Right. The more tickets I can bill for, the more money I'm going to make. The more time I have to manage my devices equals more devices inside a fully managed program, which is more ARR. Right. But as MSPs, how do we get there and how do we address these situations is something that a lot of us may not be familiar with, or it's something that we may have put to the back burner. And the whole point of this presentation is to kind of go over why we might not want to be looking at just skimping on our efficiency. So, talking about why do we care, right? We have the very simple explanation of the more efficient you are, the more profitable you're going to be. But when we look at what truly we're dealing with in efficiency, is we're looking at maximizing the amount of money we can put back in to our business. So one of the things I found with MSPs quite commonly is most MSPs seem to be in what I would say is small business mode. And what I mean by small business mode is everything that we get as profits, we're putting back into our organization in some fashion, in some way, shape, and or form. Be that we are investing more in our marketing, we are investing more in our sales org, we're hiring new technicians to increase our operational capacity, right? We're investing in a physical office if that's something we're looking for, right? So anything that we can do to reduce our cost, increase our capacity, is going to look at increasing our profit and our revenue, right? And when we look at an increase in profit, we see our business valuation go up. So we have more financial power at that point. But one of the nice side effects of operational efficiency that we don't tend to think about a lot, or at least I haven't heard many MSPs focus on, is the more efficient of a business you are, the better your relationship with your customers is going to be and the highest satisfaction they have. Right. So something we'll see later in this in this on a couple slides is mean time to resolution, or MTTR. When we look at mean time to resolution average across the nation or across North America, we see that our mean time to resolution is going to be somewhere in the 3-day range per ticket, right? And of course, those averages are demanded by outliers, right? Reset a password, it's going to be 15 to 20 minutes, right? Or it should be, right? Going into our more complicated problems, like my Exchange server blew up, right? Well, that always gets a little bit more complicated. But the more efficient we are taking care of our problems, the lower that mean time to resolution is, the happier our end users are, right? Best in class mean time to resolution, still 2 days. Okay, so we think about that in an increment of days, we understand where satisfaction comes in. Now, where that leads us as a business is satisfied customers stay. Okay, it is exponentially cheaper to retain customers than it is to get a new one. A new customer can be anywhere from 3 to 6 months in a sales cycle, right? Ad is costing you not only your salesperson's time, it is costing you marketing money. That is a chunk of change, right? I believe, if my numbers are still accurate, at Enable, it's going to cost us anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 to gain a new client. Meanwhile, to retain a client, it's going to run us pretty much labor costs, right? We have our retention team, our PSE, our head nerd teams, and maybe some development, right? So infinitely cheaper there. And the more we can retain, the higher our profitability is going to be, because we're not seeing a large amount of churn and replacement. okay, which goes towards business valuation, right? The longer you maintain your clients, the better your SOPs, SLAs, and statement or SOWs, which are standard operating procedures, service license agreements, and statements of work look when you're being purchased. And I think something to bring up with this is, again, why do we care and we focus on business valuation here is for all the MSPs I've talked to and all the reasons to become an MSP and all the reasons to continue being an MSP, I've only really ever seen them whittle down to one of two silos. Right? We can talk about how I don't like corporate America. We can talk about how I didn't like how, say, I saw my support representatives as I was managing a team being treated and all of those items. I want to be my own boss. But what it really boils down to is I want to retire comfortably or I want to leave a nest egg to my kids or to some type of mentee, right? I want to pass my business on, right? And business valuation is how you can make those two end goals, right, the most successful, right? Because while we might have started the MSP for a number of varying reasons, our end goals pretty much boil down to one of those two items, right? So therefore, business valuation becomes something we need to focus on, right? And we see more and more MSPs across the market looking at business valuation exercises taking place anywhere from once a year to every 2 years, because it is a great indicator of how well you are growing and how well you are actually working on your business rather than in your business. Okay. We also talk a lot about operational efficiency here just because of the sheer markets that we live in. And anywhere that we can bring efficiency to an MSP, we're looking to do so. Now, a lot of what we're going to talk about today is going to focus itself in the upper quartile of this particular chart, where we see fully managed and proactive packages or customers being sold to. Okay. And the reason being is our goals as MSPs, or one of our goals as MSPs, is to move our partners or our end users up this maturity model. Right. And it is a hard truth that 75% of the people inside our market, one, probably have no idea what MSP services are, fully managed services at that matter. And if they do, don't have reasoning for it. So 75% of the folks that we're going to be looking at selling to, or the businesses we're going to be looking to sell to, fit in this break fix and this a la carte portion of this spectrum, right? Where we have 20% of our proactive and fully managed, and those 25%, the upper 25%, are the ones that we want to be picking. Right? Those are the clients that view us as MSPs as a mission critical resource, tantamount to having, say, malpractice insurance if you were dealing with doctors. Right? We should be that important. So moving folks up this maturity model is definitely a part of efficiency. And if it's something that we're struggling with or something that we would like to learn more about, there is a whole making the jump to managed services bootcamp that you can find in the Institute. Okay. But each of these quartiles does offer some operational efficiency, right? Because most MSPs are not going to be fully managed exclusively, right? Even best in class MSPs hit like an 80% fully managed, 20% break fix or a la carte split, right? So when we look at the characteristics of a break fix partner, where they are calling in on a ticket by ticket basis or a problem by problem basis, they are requesting on site work more often than not just because of sheer necessity, right? We see that these are our least efficient end users. Okay, while they might be the most common in the market, again, they are our most disruptive, right? And everything we're going to be dealing with here, I know this slide says mostly, but let's change this to everything is manual labor, There's very little automation that we're going to see with these particular end users, right? And most importantly here, they are unpredictable cash flow. So when we talk about operational efficiency hitting our bottom line in some pretty staggering manners, right? Where we look at best in class versus uh, uh, our worst in class being a almost 20% jump in our EBIT numbers, right? Predictable cash flows become king, right? So again, looking at maturing our partners with us. Now, that being said, while these may not be the best customers or end users, they are quite opportunity rich in that this is where we start to get our feet wet with operational efficiency, right? Adopting a remote support tool, adopting a PSA that's going to properly report and time track for us, and we start to build out our reactive automation suite. Customer calls in because they can't save anything. We send out a script through our remote access tool that's going to empty the recycle bin, clear up all temp files. Let's see if that solves that problem or see if we need to dig in more and we need to dig in further, right? So some green fields here, right? And for those of us as MSPs who have done zero efficiency work, right? And for instance, are still billing out of an Excel sheet, well, this is where we start. How much on-site versus how much remote work are you doing? In honesty, in the MSP world, I'd like to see that almost 80-20 remote versus on-site. Right? If we have a hardware problem, we should be on site. Any otherwise, we should probably be looking at performing that work remote. Right? Okay. A la carte. So a la carte is a step up from break fix. No longer are we just fixing problems. We are now a SaaS organization as well, software as a service, right? Where we are now looking at selling patch management, AV, and those type solutions as a service to our end users, right? Okay. And while now we see more predictable cash flow, it's still not as much of our org as we would like it to be. Okay. And we're still seeing a lot of disruption, right? Because there is no predictive or proactive maintenance taking place here still. Okay. We're still reasonably inefficient, but more than break fix because now we got our mitts on some security products that help us a little bit, right? But billable time is still 75 and up percentage of your revenue with these particular type customers. So we still see some areas for efficiency, right? Same as what we would see inside our break fix. But now we've added the wrinkle of bringing in a single pane of glass in the RMM, right? Or a RMM. I assure you, if you have Incentral or Insight RMM, I am very pleased. However, if we're an MSP and we don't have an RMM, I don't care where you go. I'd like it to be enabled because I think we have the best tool set. But if we're not the fit for you, get to ConnectWise, get to Kaseya, get to anywhere because RMMs are our golden rule, right? And you would be surprised how many MSPs or folks who call themselves MSPs that use, say, our backup don't have an RMM. And this is our foot in the door to MSP services. We now have automation in regards to deployment. We've got more automation capabilities in regards to remediation of the features that your folks are using, right? Automated remediation of managed antivirus and the like. And we can start putting a little more effort into automation. Okay. But we don't truly make that step up until we get to proactive, right? looking at our opportunities before we talk about who our proactive clients are here, we see that now our RMM isn't just providing remote support and feature deployment. It is now providing self-healing. It is now providing monitoring and management of these devices. It is taking care of problems in a proactive or self-healing method before we even have to notify our end users. Okay, we're replacing hopefully 75 to 80% of our labor through automation. And then on top of that, we start to add documentation and password management to the fold. Now, that being said, backing up a bit, documentation is key. I don't care if you're break fix or if you're 100% fully managed. Document everything you do. If you do something once, document it. If you do something twice, review your documentation, make sure it's accurate, and then the third time you do it, automate it. Okay, I cannot stress that enough. But what we add here above and beyond this now is now we're adding a centralized KB and password manager. Pass portal, log me in. I don't, again, care which one, but those are the two best in my opinion. Right? So what this proactive partner or customer means to us now is our efficiency gains are going through the roof. We're taking time off of our tier 1 technicians' plate through automation and efficiencies. Our tier 2 and 3 technicians are getting freed up to actually continue to work on automation as projects internally, right? Our tier 1 technicians are getting automation tools, which now means less issues because these folks are less disruptive, sheerly due to the fact that problems are being taken care of before the end user knows they're there. And this is where we see our monthly recurring or annually recurring revenue start to exponentially grow. And this is where it starts to outweigh billable hours because we're taking care of stuff off the bat. Our end users don't have time to notice it's going wrong. Okay. And then what this also allows us to do is we already talked about proactive maintenance reducing problems, right? Smart hard drive checks telling you something needs to be replaced before the end user knows it needs to, right? Disk-based checks clearing or resulting in the clearing of temp files and emptying of recycle bin before the end user can't save something, right? But we add now security. I can now patch. I can now plug vulnerabilities. I can have a mail filtering system so you see less threats and the like. Then we get to fully managed. Fully managed are top to bottom, all you can eat clients, right? These are our clients that we control everything. These are the most efficient. They are the least disruptive because now you're even creating networks and environments that are your standard. Okay. This is the most predictable of our cash flows. Okay. And when we say here subscription revenue is much larger than time billing, it should be 80% versus 20%. Because that 20% is pretty much just out of scope and project work. Okay. And this is where once we start to get fully managed clients, we're no longer just doing these self-healing items. We're no longer just doing these simple bits of automation. We are automating 60 to 100% of our service offerings on our devices. Servers are going to be about 60, network devices are going to be about 65, and workstations, you should be able to automate your entire SOW. Okay, bringing us to anywhere from 60 to 75% of our service offerings being completely automated. This is where you have an engineer team on staff, right? So fully managed being our golden children. Okay, the biggest difference between proactive and fully managed in my mind is fully managed view you using my malpractice insurance as an example, right? At a doctor's office, MSP and malpractice insurance are On the same tier of importance, proactive folks are either fully managed folks that just got signed, so you can determine how much time they're going to use, so you can appropriately bill them per se user. Or they're folks that understand the importance of an MSP and they rank you as highly as a fully managed client, but they just can't afford it, right? They are a small, newly formed law organization that are building themselves to where they can afford fully managed services, but they can't this year because, well, let's be honest, they're still trying to get off the ground. Okay. So we talk a lot about these programs and their efficiency levels and their efficiency ratings. And why does operational efficiency mean something to us here as MSPs, right? Because it's the backbone of what's going to make us the most profitable. Okay. But that leaves us in, where am I in my day to day going to affect the necessary change to accomplish this? So when we look at our day to day functions, we'll break them up into about six little sections here inside this pie chart, right? With the largest of these sections being solving complex problems. So if we look at what that is our project work. That is our tier 3 technicians, okay? Having to get involved. All right. While these are typically not aligned with call or ticket requirements, okay, they happen sometimes. So this is our project work, right? Um, and that will be one of the few sections that we cannot affect, right? There's some minimal effects we can have there, but let's be honest, creating from scratch an Exchange server for client A is going to take just as long as it will for client B, and it's probably going to be a few days, right? You can't shorten that too much. Now, these other sections where we see a complete lack of efficiency in a lot of MSPs, we can start to quickly see why and where we can target these items, right? Searching for information. It's the name of the game in the MSP world. Technicians love to silo information, not because we're trying to be malicious, but just because that's how we've worked, right? Our technicians tend to be solo performers. Okay. Not that it's a bad thing. Okay. But that lack of collaboration means trying to find information becomes very time consuming, right? Repetitive and redundant tasks. Go talk to your tier 1 technicians. I guarantee you they all have the same set of like 5 redundant tasks to your organization that they're fed up with. And it is what it is. We can't get around them, but we can look at being more efficient with them. Right? Proactive maintenance, our weekly, our monthly, our quarterly maintenance that is a part of our SOW and SOPs, okay, that require manual intervention. Right? Timekeeping and documentation ties into searching for information, but it also goes into, we don't have good standard working procedures in place that say require our technicians to put notes into tickets while they're working on them. Okay. Tickets are updated when it's most convenient, typically the end of the day before they clock out. Right? Use time more effectively. Okay, who wants to go back and have to remember every ticket that they've worked on since the beginning of the day when you could be entering items while working on tickets, right? And then we have our administration section. The administration section is here because a lot of MSPs, especially over the pandemic time, fell into the trap of time is valuable and we want to keep our employees and our structure working together as a team, but we need to make sure that meetings are valuable. My greatest, for instance, or example of this is on the PSM team. One of the sections that I worked for had a 15-minute morning and afternoon stand up. That's a lot every day, right? That boils out to about 2.5 hours per week, Right. Well, the way those meetings were run wasn't we're going to chit chat for 15 minutes every day. And if something important pops up, we're going to talk about it. Those meetings were run with a 2-minute intro to the day, a 1-minute thing to keep you engaged, and then important items. If there were no important items, it was a quick reminder, right, of why we are PSMs, and then off to do your work. Okay. So when we look at that meeting, the amount was high, but the efficiency was good. We didn't waste time to be in meetings. We weren't in meetings for meetings' sake. Another thing is very, very conscientiously, please think about everybody's admin time. And one of the easiest ways to do that is if you think a meeting is appropriate, sit down and ask yourself, can this be done in an email? And if the answer there is yes, we probably need to be looking at doing this in an email. Okay. So just some items to be aware of. Now, when we look at this pie chart, like we mentioned earlier, the place we're not going to be able to affect much change, we can affect a little bit, but not much, is going to be these complex problems. They are what they are. They're time consuming. They're labor intensive. There's no getting around that. If you can find a way to get around that, please stop being an MSP, write a book, and go make yourself billions. Okay? Because it's just one of those, it's the nature of the beast. In the rest of this pie chart here, we're going to be looking at each of these individual sections, tying into these 4 levers to make efficiency better, right? So we look at performing regular proactive maintenance tasks. Well, when we look at the levers that we can pull here, automation is exactly one. Eliminating time wasted through automation. Let's reduce avoidable issues by, if we see problems popping up commonly in our proactive maintenance, we're attacking the root causes, and we can structure our staff to take care of these appropriately. I should not have someone with a CISSP handling monthly maintenance. Doesn't work like that. We can put them on a complex problem to make more money. Okay. So determining the levers that we're going to be pulling for each of these sections. Okay. And the statement I like here is, let's work on your business, not in your business. All right. And before we dive into what we're going to be talking about here, let's take a quick aside and talk about what that means for a second. Okay. So first off, I think everybody in the world can agree with the fact that our favorite managers are typically the managers who have worked their way up the ladder. I can say that with certainty, mine have been. Okay. Having a manager that is more knowledgeable than you because they have the on the job and going up the ladder work experience is quite nice. Don't get me wrong, but the pitfall for those managers is exactly this statement. They love getting into the weeds. A nice example of this is David Weeks. He's a director at our company, right? He should be working on how to improve our sales and retention processes, not hopping on calls to talk to our partners. But those calls are his favorite part of the day. We will never get him to stop talking to our partners, right? But the vast majority of his time, he works on Enable, not in Enable. Okay. Another good example of this would be Frank Coletti, our North American sales VP. Okay. He was a salesperson back in the day. He's moved himself up the ladder and he's very quickly understood that he is now a facilitator. He determines where we go, and then he trusts his staff underneath him to get where we need to go. So just some food for thought. Okay, we always work on our business, regardless of the fact that our temptation is to always work in, because 99 times out of 100 managers at MSPs or management or C-suites at MSPs have worked from the bottom up. Okay, so what do we do with these levers? Okay, and what are we going to be working on? So first things first, and I always hate that this is the necessary thing here, right? Because I'm not the biggest fan of KPIs or key performance indicators. They are needed, they are supposed to be used, okay? Whether or not your opinion of them is the same as mine, focusing on your KPIs and your key metrics will help you maximize profitability, right? So each of these particular levers is going to have its own set of KPIs that it works within, and focusing on those, you can't go wrong. But the response to this, when we look at focusing on our KPIs and we look at focusing on, say, our uh, um, efficiencies, say number of tickets come in versus number of tickets closed, right? We can't respond to that metric being low to hiring someone new. That is the last way we want to do business. What we should be focusing on is, do we have the operational efficiency or the automation or the documentation to back us increasing our volume? Okay. A good, for instance, or a good rule of thumb with this would be top median quartile MSPs manage 300 devices per technician. Best in class, exceptional MSPs manage 1,000. That is a huge jump. By adding automation, by adding standard operating procedures, by documenting more so information is readily available, you can get yourself to that next level. Now, should your sole question be, are my technicians managing 1,000 machines apiece? Well, then I'm not hiring somebody new. No. But if you are not in that 300 range, probably should look at getting there before we hire new headcount. Right? So being aware of what we're dealing with and being aware of how we're raising our revenue or our profits. Okay. And then the last bit is, the last thing to focus on is, this is not something that is a month and done. This is not something that is 2 years and done. Okay. Focusing on efficiency is never ending at your organizations. You will always focus on it once you start, and it needs to become a culture pillar at your organization. Okay. So, what is operational efficiency? Why is it important to us? Right? And we talked a lot about optimizing our service delivery. So, what is service delivery? Okay. Service delivery is going to be when we're putting proof to the pudding inside our customer journey. Sales and marketing have sold the dream. It's now up to you as technicians and management to deliver on this dream. So the service delivery is our manual processes of onboarding, tickets, project work, and monitoring alerts, right? And our automation processes such as routine maintenance, monitoring, and automatic remediation. Okay, the meat of what we're offering there. And we focus on these items being our service delivery and our optimization area more often than not, because it's hard to become more efficient in client offboarding and billing. Onboarding we'll talk about a little bit. Okay. But when we focus on inside our contract, what does our SOW state? What do our SOPs lead us to do? It is these middle 7 items. Okay. So starting with customer onboarding, right? This is arguably one of the most valuable things that MSPs do. And if you're not doing an assessment and onboarding period, we should be. Because what this is going to do is this is going to let you know what you are dealing with. Where do you need to target your efforts first in this client's journey? And what are we looking at updating? Right? So this initial time effort drives efficiencies in that discovery process. And that can only be handled if we are, first off, accurately documenting everything we find. Okay. There's no point in performing an assessment to give yourself the ammo to perform a proper onboarding if the assessment is stuck in someone's head or an Excel sheet. It needs to be easily accessible inside a KB or a ticketing system. And going through this and having a standardized procedure for this documentation means we're more likely to find all of our problems and give us a better understanding of our client's estate. And within the first couple times we're going through this process, it should also be uncovering what we as MSPs should have already automated. Right? So we have to help us in this particular flow our RMM, where we get our deployment methods, we get our standardization of monitoring, management, and self-healing, but we also get our discovery and deployment, as well as our vehicle to perform risk assessments, be it risk intelligence for a simple item or going as complicated as with a Qualys type product, right? Learning more about the environment so that we can better target our onboarding efforts, right? And then just 100%, it goes without saying, passwords and documentation need to be kept somewhere, so we better have a solution for it. Again, it could be a PSA like Autotask ConnectWise or MSP Manager. It could be a password and documentation management tool like Passportal and Log Me In. But what I'm asking is that it not be OneDrive, right? That it not be SharePoint. Let's put these in a secure, centralized location. There we go. Wow, sorry, my PowerPoint was acting up and that slide did not want to change. All right, so customer tickets, okay? What are we working with for customer tickets? How are we being as efficient as possible, and what tools do we have? So starting with the solutions here, we'll tie back into our problems as we go through, is first off, this is completely reactionary. If you do not have customer-friendly methods to open up tickets, right, we're already not working well as an MSP. Okay, so having a portal, using a Systray app, using email, okay, quick tickets from a website, having the ability to phone call in, we need quick, easy, and friendly customer ticket creation. Okay, and this goes into these tickets have to be captured easily. Okay, we don't need to be fumbling around on the phone to get our documentation up and running. It should be like with MSP Manager or Autotask or ConnectWise, a click of a button at most, maybe 2. Okay. And then on top of that, we need to have processes and procedures centered around accurate documentation, because that makes sure that billing doesn't fall through the cracks. So it's got to be tech friendly. How are we going to let our techs manage their tickets? Well, for instance, inside the RMM or Insight RMM, while using MSP Manager, if it's integrated properly, your technicians can add notes with a click directly from the south pane of the RMM dashboard. That sounds tech friendly, right? They can add notes down there as well. If they don't like working out of the RMM, luckily the MSP Manager tool set allows take control of devices that have Insight RMM enabled or Insight Take Control enabled, right? The integrated version. And you can see checks, tasks, and asset information in MSP Manager. So you can perform your remote work in either tool. You can access and update tickets in either tool. Okay. And then regular communication with our clients, right? Automated responses to our end users is the name of the game. They know it's automated, you know it's automated, but it makes them feel better. You submit a ticket within a 5 to 10 minute time frame, you get a response back. Thank you for your ticket. We are so happy that you are using us as an MSP. All the feels goods. We will quickly get to your ticket as we can. Here is the queue it's in. Here is the technician who might be working on it. Expect communication, blah, blah, blah. Make them feel better. Okay, better customer satisfaction equals better retention, which equals more profit. Okay. Inside the project work, we talked about this section being the hardest to make more efficient, right? And pretty much what it boils down here to is please document everything you can actually document. Please make sure we schedule, we plan ahead, and we follow those plans and statements of statements of operational procedure, right? Or standard operational procedures, excuse me. Okay, because that makes everything go smoothly, and it means we'll finish in the quickest time frame. My example for this is we've all had a technician working on a project call out sick. Well, if everything's documented, notes are taken, time's accurately put in, John, who's sick, can quickly and easily be replaced by Jane. If everything's stuck in John's head, there's no reason to even put Jane on the project because there's not going to be any progress made. Right. So some items for thought there. Okay. Monitoring alerts. Okay. Alerts are always going to be reactive in some fashion, but we should be looking at dealing with them as proactively as we can, which means automate as much remediation based off of the alerts you've determined to be efficient for you inside your RMM. Okay. Every time you add a check to an RMM, question 1 is, do I need it? Question 2 is, are the thresholds actionable, or is it throwing up white noise? And the third question is, how do I automate it? And every check and alert should be treated like that. Okay. I cannot stress enough how expensive it is to have an RMM that's not properly configured with good, diligent thresholds, cleanups on a 6 to 12 month basis, and proper templating. Okay. I've talked to too many technicians that have openly and brazenly inside training meetings said, there's anywhere from 40 to 50% of the devices in my dashboard failing on a daily basis. I don't even care anymore. I ignore alerts. I go and find what's mission critical. That's rough to hear as someone who likes efficiency, right? Good rule of thumb. 15 to 20% of the devices inside your RMM should have a failing check at any given point in time. So if we're managing 1,000 devices, 200 to 150 should be failing checks. Okay, of those 200 and 200, 150 to 200, 60 to 75% of those failed checks should have automated remediation attached to them. meaning that our technicians are going to touch anywhere from 60 to 80 alerts, right, a day. Not bad, especially when we look at a team of, say, 5 technicians, right? So let's not make them distracting. Okay. The other item on this page that we need to be aware of that I cannot stress enough is that bottom bullet point under solutions, right? And we're skipping documentation because I think I've already hit documentation enough. We don't need to hear me say accurate documentation equals accurate reporting, which equals better auditing of your dashboard, better determinations of where you should be targeting your automation efforts. Okay. But back to the solutions, the last bullet point. Automated maintenance does not solve symptoms. It solves root cause issues. One of the largest time wastes I've seen at an MSP is recurring tickets for simple things. If a printer can't print because it is continually trying to connect to a printer, or sorry, a workstation that has invalid credentials on it, and you're seeing 15, 20, 30,000 failed login checks a day, and you don't update those credentials, right? You just research why we're seeing failed logins, that's selling yourself short. And I know that's a stupid, simple example that we would all be like, well, why wouldn't you do that? Okay. Print spooler failing on a regular basis. Delving into the root cause there could be a lot. But solving it and solving the root cause is a problem rather than just restarting the print spooler as a service, much more efficient, even though that one ticket's going to be much quicker. Okay, so going back to our customer journey here, those are the pink items. We're looking at taking these manual processes and making them more efficient. Well, these automated processes, okay, these are projects that we should be working on or projects that we should be having our engineers already touching, okay, because a lot of this is table stakes. Right? So I say things like 60 to 75% of your service delivery should be automated, right? You think that's an insane number, but then we come to routine maintenance and what we can automate there, right? Automate the AV scans and remediations, automate the installation of patch, right? Go through and automate your monthly maintenance. Go through and automate password retention and update policies, as well as automate the rotation of passwords themselves, right? Now we start looking at that 60 to 70% with some of these table stake items and realize like, oh man, if I wasn't automatically or in some type of method automating my patching, I was doing it manually. Okay, I get where that's like 20% of my day to day, right? So that 60% isn't as unfeasible as we think. Okay. And this routine maintenance is designed, one, to help prevent security issues, but two, solve the vast majority of your problems before they even start. Right? It also allows for now management by exception. 90% of your machines are healthy, 10 are unhealthy. Which ones are we going to focus our management efforts on? Right? And I'll be honest, okay, it says here most of your routine maintenance can be automated. I think that should say all. I've yet to see a monthly maintenance routine that's been standardized across MSPs as an average, right? This is what our average routine maintenance looks like. I haven't seen a bit of it that can't be automated, right? Monitoring, okay? Monitoring is our bread and butter for peace of mind and productivity. in my mind. Routine maintenance is great. It is well up there. Do not get me wrong. But when we talk about monitoring, this is where we get to put the most proof into. As MSPs, we don't sell software. We don't sell IT services. That's what we know we sell, but what our end users think we sell is productivity and peace of mind. Okay. And monitoring, discovering of problems before they can cause disruption because our thresholds are set up properly leads us to one, decreased reaction time if something requires manual intervention. And then it leads us to automated self-healing. If a disk space check fails, we should not be remoting into a device almost ever. That disk space check failing kicks off an emptying of the recycle bin and clean up all temp files. Then let's see what happens there. Right? And again, management by exception. Where do we focus our efforts? Right? And our solution is very simply the RMM here. Right? Scan to see which patches are missing, automatically install. Check fails, kick off remediation. Okay. Pretty simple, I think, pretty easy and understood. Right. And we've harped on automatic remediation here a lot, but I cannot stress this enough. The more you can free up human resources to work on your complex problems or to work on automation projects or to work on client relationships, the better you are or the better off you are as an MSP. Okay. Right. I find two things with this that I hear a lot. Okay, that we'll address here. Okay. First up is, well, even in my proactive program, I like my alerts generating tickets because then I have to talk to my client and that generates money. Okay. Two things to address there. First off, I'm very much of the mind that if you're an MSP who's doing your job exceptionally well, your partners or your end users will never have to talk to you. You'll have to talk to them once a month and once a quarter to show how valuable you are. Okay. To show them why they need you. But at the end of a month, they should be able to look back and go, I didn't even see a problem. Right? That's a perfect MSP. Is that real? Probably not. I don't know an MSP that can pull that off in the real world, but it's our goal, right? And automatic remediation helps us a lot with this because what we start doing, where now we're no longer getting contacted by our end users for as many tickets and our billable hours drop, we just add a minimum time. 15 minutes, 5 minutes. Okay. And the reason being is we've got to pay for this automation somehow. Okay. And paying for it doesn't mean we're seeing the benefits of automation. I'm not paying for automation by letting automation create more time. I'm paying for the engineering of the automation with my tickets. So in the real world, what I did is I had a 5-minute minimum on every ticket that came through my dashboard, regardless of whether or not it was a all you can eat or proactive client. Okay. And that minimum was 5 minutes. That is how I tracked time that automation saves me. And it's also how I paid myself to automate. Okay. Was that $5 here and there? Right. The other thing that I've heard a lot from MSPs, especially from technicians, is I will automate myself out of a job. That is one of the more painful things to hear because I love automation. I've been screaming to the rooftops, automation is the greatest thing on the planet for the past, well, time it and able. Okay. And I continually try and drive this home. Let's say you're a tier 1 tech and for some strange reason, you have a week or 2 weeks where you're just not seeing tickets. And you take it upon yourself to start automating your job. right? And by the end of this time period, whatever it is, you've whittled it down to almost 75 to 80% of your job is automated. There is no way, shape, and or form you have automated yourself out of a job at that point. What you've really done is you've automated yourself into a promotion, right? Because if somebody can do that, they can automate a whole lot more. And they don't need to be tier one anymore. They need to be on an engineering team, right? So automatic remediation is a necessity, and let's not be scared of it, right? Okay, so just some items there that I find with this, all right? But automatic remediation is the name of the game. The less downtime, the more our end users are productive and have peace of mind, and the happier they are. All right, so if you want to take a screenshot, we're going to take a quick one here. We are roughly an hour and 6 minutes in. So when we get out of this boot camp and we look at how do we stack up, brutal honesty with this set of questions here is what we're looking for. How am I dealing with automation and efficiency in these sections? And if you can say my automatic remediation is as good as Joe was talking, I feel like I've automated 60 to 75% of my service delivery inside RMM checks and tasks, kicking off remediation. That's great. Knock it off the list. Let's go somewhere else. Okay. Now we get into the part of this that while I say I'm never the biggest fan of KPIs, I am a fan of these because they're tangible, if you will. So going through the measuring service delivery here and what we're going to be talking about, I compare this to my time as a PSM. And as a PSM, there were some very tangible things that we could measure, right? Retention number, we could measure client retention versus revenue retention. We could do machine retention inside our solutions, right? But what was very difficult to measure is success and value. So there was a lot of what we were doing as PSMs, especially when we were creating the team, that was throw a KPI at the wall, see if it sticks, right? And there were a lot of KPIs that we just couldn't get to work, right? And a nice, for instance, with this was the way I ran my PSM book of business. So we were given a whole lot of free reign, especially in the beginning. And I tend to be much more along the technical side. So while some of the other PSMs were running QBRs or quarterly business reviews to discuss layered security programs or big initiatives at our MSP partners, orgs that we were going to assist with or offer some advice on, right? What I was doing was very much taking this in a, let's do an RMM audit. Pump you out about a 30 to 40 page document that shows you where you can or cannot improve your RMM, right? And while we're doing that, we'll talk about operational efficiency, right? Or let's review EDR. And while we do that, let's talk about our layered security program. So in the KPIs that we're tracking to show success and value, QBRs, right? I was very much failing. But then my management team would go and talk to my partners, my book of business, and they would have shining reviews, right? So measuring intangibles is difficult. Whereas here inside the MSP world, at least when we're looking at service delivery, we're hitting very tangible items with our service delivery, right? Volume and capacity, speed, right? Looking at our SLAs, MTTR or mean time to resolution, response time, customer satisfaction with solidified NPS or net promoter scores, right? First time to fix percentages. utilization time, right? Going into that adage or the quote here from Peter Drucker, you can't manage what you can't measure, right? And in some senses, the PSM world, that's very difficult. But as an MSP, I like these KPIs, even though I'm not the biggest fan of KPIs as a whole, right? Because we're managing and measuring tangible here. 2 tickets come in, 1 gets completed. It looks like my volume versus capacity is I'm operating at 50% of my volume, right? We need to deal with that. How am I going to deal with that? Right? So uh, uh, giving us a little bit easier of a time inside this world, right? So then what do we look at when we are dealing with these KPIs? What are we going to track to measure those items in service delivery? And the 7 that we like to start off with, because they are the biggest indicators of efficiency, at least in Dave Wilkeson, the author of this PowerPoint's mind, and I tend to agree, are response time, SLA adherence, utilization rate, ticket volume, mean time to resolution, first time fix percentage, and net promoter score. And all of these tie in together in some fashion. So we'll go through these and we'll look at how we're going to measure the KPIs. We're going to look at why are we measuring them and what are we going to do with some of them. Okay. So response time and SLA adherence. Okay. If we don't have SLAs, standard licensing agreements, inside our contracts, we very much should. They are a driver of efficiency because if you break them, you breach your contract. And what this really just does is it puts importance on being as efficient and responsive as possible, right? So when we talk about response time here, we focus on the fact that first off, customers want to know that the requests have been captured. We can automate that. That's nice. But first response is not the automated response that gets pumped out of your PSA. Thank you for submitting a ticket. We have received your request and are reviewing. It is the first time that a technician responds to that ticket. Okay. The automated response is there for convenience and comfort. We are worried about how long does it take to a technician to get on the job? And this starts when the customer calls and it ends when we have our tech on the job. And if we look at this, we need to appropriately set our SLAs. So I made mistakes with this when I started my little MSP. I had an SLA. I thought an hour to 2 hours would be reasonable. So depending on the severity, I put in an hour and a half, and an hour. I quickly had to amend that. Now, I wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, but I had to put my SLAs out to 3 hours, hour and a half, 1 hour. Okay. My average being about 2 hours and 15 minutes, which is a little bit below best in class here, but reasonably above average. Okay. And when we look at average customer support for first response, we see 7 hours. Okay. That doesn't tell me that the national average of MSPs are so busy that it takes them 7 hours to respond. This tells me that the vast majority of MSPs inside the nation don't have proper processes in place to notify their technicians and management when tickets are created. They don't have proper notifications when SLAs are breached. Okay. Now, I get why response time is up. Okay. I understand why my 1 hour response time was unreasonable. Working on projects, not noticing that a ticket comes in, right? Dealing with a complex problem for one of my end users. I can't pause and look at tickets that are coming in, right? But every work has a natural break. Every process has a natural break. Take it, review some tickets, and let's get that response time down. Okay. Especially when we look at this being one of our most constant bits of communication with our end users. Okay. Now, are we never going to break our SLAs? It's unreasonable to think that. But getting to where 90 to 95% of the time tickets do not break any SLAs, 95 to 98% of the time tickets do not break any SLAs, we're looking at good and best in class. Okay, so judiciously put out your average response time, right? I always recommend starting in the 3 to 4 hour range and decreasing as necessary. Okay. But before we even think about SLAs, SOPs need to be in place to keep us on track, to keep our technicians and our dispatchers and our ticket responders properly working and properly moving forward. Okay. Without those SOPs, we start to run into problems. Okay. The next one we have here is utilization rate. And utilization rate, I think, is the hardest for us as MSPs to deal with, right? Unless we're a little bit larger of an MSP. And the reason I say this is, especially if we are a 1-man or a 2-man or a 3-man shop, we have found very like-minded people that are dedicated to growing and evolving a business, which means there's not really an off time. And that makes utilization a bit unreasonable. Okay. So, what we think of with utilization is either reactive, which is hours billed over hours worked, we get our reactive utilization rate, or our managed utilization rate, hours billed plus hours managed over hours worked. Okay. And we need to be optimizing this particular KPI because more than anything, does it put us into higher profits? Okay. We can see here 2 points. First off, understood point. Labor is your most expensive resource, hands down. Okay. This was something that it dawned on me, but was never truly driven home until I was talking to one of our largest MSPs. 25 to 30,000 machines inside our software suite alone. Okay. Looking at almost 55K a month to enable. All right. And we were talking about where we could find some additional revenue. So we started to take a look at this MSP's knock, right? And this MSP's engineer team. That's where we stopped. Right. We weren't saving money on labor, right? Because we realized just those 2 teams exponentially outweighed our software costs, right? So I guess what I'm saying is I didn't realize how expensive it was because I ran a 1-man shop, right? But it's far and away our most expensive resource, and the more we can utilize it, the better. And we see a direct relationship between utilization rates and profitability. Right. So we look at the 2 median quartiles that we talked about earlier, they're probably in the 60 and 70% range, right? That 3 to 9% EBITDA, probably a direct correlation there. They could be a little bit better. And then we look at best in class with 80% and a EBITDA of 10 plus, right? Now, utilization rate outside of labor expense was something that I've been dealing with for a very long time. And I partly knew what I was doing in that I was dealing with utilization rate, but what I focused on for the vast majority of my time dealing with this was employee happiness, coworker happiness. Okay. So I dealt with this most at Men's Warehouse, and I know that's not an MSP, but surprisingly enough, retail providers and their management is very similar to our MSPs. Okay. In that I had a production team, I had a sales team, right? And we were pushing services. And what I found, to toot my own horn, is the happier I kept my employees, the better our customer service was. And believe me, this was through trial and error and not reading or having a presentation like this, which I would have loved. But it got to the point that on the entire Eastern Seaboard, so we're going Chicago East, the store I ran had the lowest amount of customer complaints percentage-wise to customers seen. And I will 100% maintain that was due to what I thought was employee happiness, but was really utilization rate. And it was running this very fine line of how hard can I work my salespeople or my production team. In Men's Warehouse, it was tailors, right? As an MSP, it would be our technicians or our engineers, right? To keep them as happy as possible while dealing with our clients. Okay. And I even saw a shift with this where we had a new management team come in above me and change some practices, right? But I got to very close to an 85% utilization rate, which was right where I started to see my scales tipping, right? You might have seen different, but that 80% right about is there. So the way I was looking at this was, if I've got somebody on an 8-hour shift, I'm going to give up time in a couple places. First off, I'm not going to have somebody clock out to take a bio break, right? That's just rough. You can't do that. Actually, I think OSHA says you can't do that, to be quite honest, right? So 15 to 20 minutes a day gone there, right? Then I've got unforeseen emergencies and conversations that need to be had, right? The spouse that was staying at home had some problems with the children that needed to be taken care of and you needed to be on the phone with, right? My favorite conversation with this is I had one of my sales staff. She had two twin boys that were, I can only say, the most difficult children I've ever heard of. Because while they, not that they were unhappy children, but good God, were they mischievous. My favorite conversation from them, she had 30 minutes on the phone talking about why her children shouldn't put peanut butter and jelly up the ice dispenser on the outside of the fridge. Right? That was a conversation that needed to be had, as funny as it was, right? Because she was helping keep her household better, right? And giving her 20 minutes, 30 minutes to have that conversation gave her peace of mind, right? Then there's emergencies like the kid's sick at preschool, right? And then there's just sheer mental health items, right? And I, not to use a you know, pop culture word nowadays, right? But let's think of mental health. We've been thinking of this for years as service providers. We just never termed it mental health, right? We might have called it a recoup or a refresh or just a sanity break, right? We've all had a end user or a client call us, spend 30 minutes to an hour with us on the phone, and all that they really wanted in life was to have somebody hear about them complain. They didn't want a problem solved. They didn't want a solution in 10 minutes. They just wanted you to hear them curse up and down the street and complain. And after that, you're beat. The next person that you talk to, your customer service isn't going to be on par, much less exceptional, right? So having that 5 to 10 minute cigarette break to refresh, or that 5 to 10 minute water break to go complain to somebody in the back, is worth it. So when we look at this utilization rate, if I've got somebody on an 8-hour shift, my goal at Men's Warehouse was to get about 6 hours and 45 minutes out of them, 7 hours out of them. A little bit high. but I had a good team, right? If we have 8-hour shifts, we're going to get 6.5 hours, 6.4 hours worth of work out of our technicians, right? Which is reasonable just to deal with regular personal life that can't be avoided while on the job, right? And I say this is hard for MSPs because as we start small and we're single owner, business is life, right? You have 120% utilization rate because you just don't have any other choice. And the first person you hire is going to reflect that drive and that mentality. Then as you grow, we need to start adjusting those expectations. And I found that MSPs have a hard time doing that, right? So this is a metric that I love because it ties into almost everything else we're dealing with, right? If your utilization rate is reasonably high, I like the 80% number. Your tickets are going to go quicker because happy employees work quicker, right? Your customer service is going to go up because happier employees equal better customer service, right? Your frustration levels are going to go down, so mean time to resolution probably goes up. You won't take the easy way out as much because you're not as frustrated with problems, so you tend to find a root cause quicker, right? This is one of those cascading metrics that if we can follow this month over month and we are getting to 80% and we are maintaining 80 to 85% utilization, we're doing a pretty darn good job, right? Now, if we're below 60%, to lack of a better term, we probably need to be cracking a whip because you're throwing money into the wind at that point. And I think those expectations are reasonably set and reasonably easy to say, hey, look, like we need to be focusing on this, right? And I don't think many reasonable people will disagree there. And if we do have somebody disagree, well, maybe we need to look at, a different direction for us. You don't get paid, unfortunately, for doing nothing. If you can find a way to get paid for doing nothing, please let me know. I want in. Okay. So just some food for thought there. I love this metric because it's a great general metric for your organization that gives you, I think, some good metrics to take a look at. Okay, next one here. Average time to resolution. This is yet another one that I looked at and I think I personally misjudged. Mean time to resolution or average time to resolution, I thought was going to be much lower than what it is when I started my MSP. I couldn't get around it. I thought it was going to be, hours. When we look at here, it's in honesty closer to days. Okay, or it is days. So what are our wow, sorry, brain fart. What our metric is here is time elapsed between the creation of the ticket, so the call, the email, that kind of deal, to the complete resolution of this. And there's a couple pitfalls with this metric. While this is a very good metric to follow, right? This is not a global metric to follow. This is technician by technician. We do not compare apples to oranges. And that's even within our tier 3 technicians or our tier 1 technicians or tier 2, right? Let's say we got 2 tier 3 technicians. I've got Johnny and Jane. Johnny's a chit chatter and he likes making friends with the end users. So got about 15 minutes in each call where he's just going to be, how's the dog? How's the family? How's the football team? Right? Did you do anything fun with your hobby? I learned you did. It's a great skill to have, and I appreciate it happening, right? But his mean time to resolution is going to be just a little bit longer than Jane's, right? Now, Jane gets everything done very efficiently and quickly, and the clients appreciate her for that, right? So when we look at these items, it's difficult to compare. Now, what we want to see is every 6 months, every quarter, those mean time to resolution numbers dropping per technician, right? And if we see one technician drop hours compared to everybody else who's dropping an hour or 15 minutes or so, right? What did that tech do? Maybe that's something we want to replicate, or maybe that's cause for alarm because something's starting to go wrong for that technician. Okay. But technician by technician basis. This is not an individual ticket metric either. We can't compare this in small or micro scopes. This is a macro scope KPI. Okay. However, this is a good metric to track. Okay. If we see a decrease, we need to address it. Is this a training problem? Is this a tools problem? Is this an automation or documentation problem? If we see an increase, what happened to cause it, and can we repeat and scale that cause of increase? Okay. Next up, we've got ticket volume. Ticket volume, again, is something that we're going to be looking at a macro scale. Okay, this isn't a daily, day over day metric, a ticket over ticket metric, right? This is a weekly, this is a monthly, this is a quarterly metric. So maybe not as big as our MTTR metric, but still something we need to be viewing on a macro level, because what we're looking at is as an organization, not technician by technician either here, we are looking at our overall capacity and productivity. How many tickets came in? How many did we complete? Right? What was our win percentage, if you will? Okay. And we're looking for two things in regards to operational efficiency happen here: an increase in billable tickets or projects, and a decrease in non-billable items. The decrease in non-billable items tells us that our automation and our documentation and our SOPs are doing their job. And an increase in billable tickets or outside of scope tickets or project work is telling us that that's solving complex problems, that highly profitable and large part of this pie, the pie chart we saw earlier, are getting bigger. Right? If I have somebody in a fully managed program and I'm completing, say, a project a year for them at $150 an hour, averaging 10 hours a project or more, that sounds pretty nice when I can add another project or another 2 to that per year, because now I've freed up my technicians to start looking at handling things like replacement of hardware on a network that's out of warranty and the like. Okay, sounds pretty darn good to me. Okay. All right. Next up, we've got first time to fix percentages. First time to fix percentages, I think, are crucial for us as MSPs, but there aren't any averages here. Okay. Ooh, and yeah, okay. I did not miss something I want to make sure I talk about. So what I mean with there's no averages here is we take this on a MSP by MSP basis. Sometimes we have to find the quick fix, which deals with a symptom. Sometimes we have the times to report and research. Okay. But what we want to see is an increase in the percentage month over month, year over year. Okay. Because it means we're getting more effective. And the way we track this is cases closed minus cases reopened for the exact same problem divided by cases closed. And this is a measure of our efficiency. Okay. This is a overall and by technician report. I need to know that my company is first time to resolve 75% of the time. but I've got John who's at 50 and Jane who's at 95%. Why are they so disparate if they are the same tier, going back to both of them being tier 3, right? And what is the root cause here? Is it because Johnny's working in security and a lot of what he has to deal with is just end users being end users, and his reopened tickets tend to be because the end users aren't listening to training? Do we need to hammer some items home there and deal with that in a little bit more heavy-handed manner? Or is it because Jane actually takes the time to research root cause and her volume is a little bit lower while Johnny's volume is higher? He sees that because his tickets are reopened 2 or 3 times, right? Where are we going to take this information? And what we want to see is where you start, increase month over month, year over year, right? There is no national average with this, because what it really boils down to is a culture of research and finding that root cause. It's hard to say there's a national average there. Okay, I would think 50% starting off is reasonable, 75% gets you into good, 90% gets you into best in class, right? Those are my guesses, or my best numbers. And I say that because, let's be honest, you're never going to first time solve everything. It just doesn't happen like that. So 100% I think is straight out. Okay, if you get to 100% first time resolved, I would love to have a conversation with you so I can steal every behavior you have set up to get to that 100% first time resolved. I'll do a boot camp just on that. All right. Last metric here that we're going to go over is our net promoter score. The net promoter score, I think, stands alone as a KPI. So if we quickly come back to our KPIs here, right? We see response time, we see first time to fix percentage, we see mean time to resolution, and SLA adherence all go into our utilization rates and our ticket volumes as our macro things to track to see where we're doing well. We see how all of those connect better. The quicker your response time, the better your first time to fix percentage, the better your mean time resolution is going to be, the better your ticket volume gets, the higher your utilization rate can become. Okay. The more you respond to your SLAs, the better your mean time to resolution, right? The quicker your response time, the higher your ticket volume gets, right? So we can see all of those working together. Net promoter score is your global KPI. How am I as an MSP doing? And there's nothing technical that goes into this because you're querying your end users, right? This is a feeling, this is a gut check, if you will. So what that means is this is something we need to be doing every 6 months, maybe once a quarter, but 6 months at least. Okay, you can't do this once a year because you're going to catch a business owner on a bad day and your net promoter score is going to come in as a 0. Right? And it's because his building got flooded down in Florida due to Ian, and it's going to take you 6 days to get everything back up and running because all of his hardware was lost. His infrastructure was just done. Right? And to use a real world example, the person who got hit was a Budweiser distributor. Right, manages a Budweiser distributor. So not only is the MSP themselves out of business, they're now having to tell their distributor, look, guys, there's nothing we can do about this. We're both out of business for the next 6 days. Right. And just as a gut reaction, there's, screw my MSP for not being able to pull off a miracle, zeros. Right. Catch them 6 months later after delivering best in class customer service. Right. That jumps up to a 9 or a 10. Right. So you've got to realize that this is something you can't just do once a year or once every couple years. This is something that comes out every 6 months. And what this measures is what we call promoters versus detractors. Detractors are people who will never, under any circumstances, ever recommend your services to a friend or colleague. Okay. Promoters are somebody that are always going to recommend you. And this is a scale of 1 or 0 to 10. Detractors having the largest percentage here, 6 to 0. What we call passives, folks that they may or may not talk about you word of mouth, but it's not like they're unhappy with your services. They have a couple complaints, but they're not quite a promoter at 7 to 10, or sorry, 7 to 8, and our promoters 9 to 10 out of 10. The reason I think this is such an important KPI and something we focus on as MSPs is whether or not we like it, word of mouth, until you get to a certain size, and I tend to see this at the 10 million mark, 5 million mark, word of mouth is just our best advertising. Does that mean you don't do any other marketing? By all means, no. You should market. Email, social media campaigns, go to your chamber of commerce, rub elbows with the other business owners, get your name out there at their events, right? Run and training webinars, go to conferences. Okay, marketing's real, but small business owners to medium-sized business owners are the chattiest Cathys on the planet, and they love to keep up with the Joneses. So if there's a legal convention, right, that's talking about owning and operating a medium to large legal firm, and you've got one of your clients sitting next to somebody who's complaining about their MSP, couldn't even restore a PowerPoint within 15 minutes, right? God, that stunk because I lost out on a prospective client with this. And your client's sitting right next to him. Oh, well, my MSP gives me a local speed vault for quicker restore, or a local virtual drive where I could pull myself, I could restore myself. Why doesn't your MSP do that? Best marketing you're ever going to get as a small MSP, or a medium-sized MSP for that matter, right? So having this net promoter score be high is good, and we need to track it. Now, our metrics for this, we're going to look at promoter percentage minus detractor percentage, or if you want a little bit more complicated way to do this, promoters minus detractors over number of respondents times 100. And if our percentage is 70 or up, we are best in class. That does not mean relax. That means don't stop what you're doing, keep it up. 30 to 70%, you're doing pretty good. There's room for improvement. Okay. 30 to 0 is good. NPS percentage of less than 0. We need to be talking about why you have way more detractors than promoters. Okay. And NPS surveys that go out, right, can be very simple. How satisfied with you are with our account management? Do you appreciate our QBRs? How satisfied are you with support? Please put any comments down below to talk about any improvements you think could be made, and what did we do exceptional comments below, right? Or you can get granular, right? Please fill in who's your most common tech support rep that you deal with. How would you rate them, right? What's the most common ticket? What's your response time like? Get as granular or as macro as you would like with this. Okay, but make sure it's an accurate representation of your business, and make sure that you can get food for thought. And what we should be dealing with off of this isn't quite taking these surveys and applying them to our business. We should have some type of account management in place to react. Okay. If you get a 9 or a 10 or a 0 to 6, your account management team should, within the next business day, be setting up a meeting to go over that score. Mr. or Mrs. Business Owner, why did we get a 10? You talked about these things in your survey, but I need to know what we've gone above and beyond with to deserve that 10 out of 10. And do enough of those little follow-up interviews, you'll realize what your best services are and the things you do best as an MSP, right? Mr. or Mrs. Business Owner, you gave us a 2 out of 10. What's going on? Well, I feel like I'm lost because your average response time is somewhere in the 6-hour range, right? You can start to target where to go. And those examples are easy to pull from where we should start to target, right? But you can see why we would need to do this, where we're going to be looking at applying this, right? So this is something that directs us to maybe look at some of our other KPIs or our SOPs or our SOWs, and where are we not quite delivering, okay? Net Promoter Score, I think, is big. And I think it's something that MSPs look at and go, man, that's a corporate thing, right? When it should be something we're doing on a 6-month basis. You need to know how much your clients like you. And on top of that, it is your best indicator of retention. 7 and below, you need efforts. 8 and up, keep doing the same amount of effort. Don't change. Or more effort and improve, right? If you see a detractor, that's a churn risk. Immediately open up your churn or retention cases as you will. Okay. After confirming, say maybe it wasn't a tech that got their hands on the NPS survey and just said, oh, this is a waste of time. Click, 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 click down the 0 column. All right. Last couple sets of slides here, and we will start with improving your service delivery. So we've talked a little bit about efficiency, why it's good for us. Why do we care about it? We've talked about where we can look at improving. We've talked about what are the measurable tangibles that we're going to look at to determine where we need to improve. But what are we going to do to improve with this? How are we going to take those 4 operational levers and turn them, right? Our 4 operational levers: structuring staff, leveraging automation, eliminating time waste, and reducing avoidable issues, and start applying them to our business. So tools for improvement, pretty simple, right? Based off of our levers. Align people properly, structure your processes, employ automation, and then provide incentives. Weirdly enough, all of these come into one of those 4 things. Incentives is one I like to talk about because it's something I don't think enough MSPs think about, and there's some pretty fun and inventive ways that we can deal with that. But let's start off with our staff and process. You are only efficient as your organization is structured. Point blank. If you've got 10 techs and none of them are tiered, there's no escalation process, there's no division of labor, there's no workflows to properly assign tickets, there's just never going to be efficiency. Just is what it is. Okay. And this can be automated. Every PSA I've ever dealt with has some type of workflow that allows you to assign tickets based off of workload and skill set. We can start there. And it relies on documentation and SOPs. I am not saying that everyone that works at your organization needs to be a replaceable worker, and we all have unique employees. We all have employees with unique skill sets. We all have employees that thrive in certain environments, and there is no such thing as carbon copies or, replaceable employees, if you will. Okay, but documentation and SOPs make them interchangeable. I am fully aware that John is a security expert and Jane is my networking expert. But if Jane is sick and she's in the middle of setting up a network for one of my end users and John is just doing a SIM audit, if I've got good documentation and SOPs on how to get that network work done, John should be able to step in and at least progress the project further until Jane can get back from being sick. And progress is enough for our end users to be happy. There's not an end user out there that won't understand the fact that my networking specialist is sick. I'm going to put this person in their place, but it's not Jane, right? As long as progress is made, can be reported, and can be shown, they'll be happy. Well, reasonably happy. Okay. And nice examples for this, as we look at this, we're going to look at technical staff in a best-in-class MSP. And we are talking a large best-in-class MSP, right? 20 million plus is what we see our numbers corresponding to here, right? And we can discuss smaller if we need. But when we look at this big MSP, we see 65% of their technician staff or technical staff works at their help desk and knock. Right? 15% in professional services. Those are the big ticket items. 5% out in the field. Okay. Now, as we shrink in size, right, we see a little bit less operational maturity. I'd love to see these numbers reflected in smaller MSPs, say the 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 million range, but we know that's not feasible because we are still pushing towards true maturity. We're going to have more break fix clients because there's still just a larger number of them left over, larger percentage left over. If I'm $1 million MSP who is pushing everybody from break fix to fully managed up that maturity scale we saw earlier through a la carte and proactive, I might be 50-50, which means I've got to have 10 to 15% of my technician staff being field. I've got to have 15% being professional services. I've got to have only 50% of my technical staff being help desk because I still need a manager, right? I still need somebody there for structure. Okay. But the key ideas that we're operating towards here is on-site equals expensive. So why not use the tools at your disposal to do work remotely? Specifically inside N-central and inside RMM, we'd like it, the vast majority of it, to be done out of the remote background tool. Remote background's command line interface or PowerShell interface that allows you to do work without your end users knowing you're there. Right? That sounds pretty great when we're selling productivity and peace of mind. Right? That becomes during the QBR, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Business Owner, we saw a couple of these problems pop up that were pretty drastic. We fixed them while you guys were remaining productive. Any business owner that hears, I did not lose productivity while you fixed a problem, will be jumping for joy. Remote work also tends to go quicker. So not only is it cheaper, it's quicker. Right? And then we have our projects. This is the big bulk of our billable time. These are the big ticket items, 20, 30, 50, $60,000 projects. If we're lucky, 100K. Right? And then on top of this, we should be tiering our help desks. If you're 1 or 2 technicians, this becomes a little bit more difficult. But if we've got 5 technicians, we should be tiered. 311, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, 221, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, right? We should be tiered. Tier 1 solves 75% of our tickets. Tier 2 is going to solve 15 to 20%. These are the more complicated problems. Tier 3, they're reserved for the big items, right? Ian hit, flooded. They'll rebuild the network and the infrastructure. Tier 2 will come in to complete the install of applications, software, security postures, and the like, right? And this is because Tier 3 also handles your projects. Okay, they handle the true big ticket. Okay, they also handle your automation in conjunction with Tier 2. But Tier 3 should be almost your engineers. I'd like you guys to have engineers on staff as well, but that's not feasible for some of us. So Tier 3 gets to pull double duty. Okay. And when we look at this to figure out how we are doing inside our technical staff, is each tech should manage to create 250K in annual recurring revenue. If that's a Tier 3 technician, that's pretty easy. They should be able to pull that out in projects per year, no problem. Not to mention the automation they're creating to save you time on top of that. Tier 1, it's a little bit more difficult. If we look at 250K at $150 billable per hour, right? That comes out to be about 32.25 hours of work per week on billable tickets, which quite nicely corresponds with our 80% utilization rate. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Okay. 250K per tech. One of the weirdest interviews I've ever heard of as an MSP was Jason Murphy, the N Central head nerd. He worked for one of the largest MSPs in North America. I believe he said they sold for somewhere in the realm of 28 to $30 million. It's pretty big. Okay. He said his interview wasn't what skills do you have? What are you bringing to the table here? It was legitimately the business owner saying, I need you to prove you can make me $250,000 a year and I'll hire you. Right. So it is if what I would argue is one of the most successful MSPs I've ever heard of, right? That's their interview process. That number's got some value. And I do think it's there. Okay. And excuse me, where does this structure bring us, right? It brings us to shortened resolution time. Right person's getting the right ticket. Increased utilization. If the ticket time or mean time to resolution is shorter, I take in more tickets, meaning I can bill for more, right? And increased capacity and ticket volume. Pretty easy to catch up there. Okay. Processes. I cannot stress documentation and operational efficiency enough. Okay. If at the end of the call, the only thing that you walk out of here with today is the mantra of do something one time, you're learning it, document it. Do something twice, you're cementing it in your head, review your documentation, make sure it's good. Third time you do it, you should automate it if you can. If that's the only thing you walk out of here today, you'll do reasonably fine with this. Okay. Build in your standard operating procedures. That mantra of automation, automate, document should be part of your culture. Define an escalation process and develop documentation templates. Don't let people create documentation all on their own. There should be a process to create the documentation. Okay. Unless everybody is a technical writer, okay, we're all going to talk about things a little bit different and translation may get lost. Point in case, I was helping one of our partners inside N Central. He was looking at pulling recovery keys for BitLocker. Now, I was trained on the RMM for years before being introduced to N Central, right? I just didn't have a partner that ever owned N Central, so I never had to learn it technically. So my vernacular or my verbiage when I'm talking about monitoring services inside N-central is I call them checks, just because I can't get the RMM out of my head. I've been working with N-central for 1.5 years. I've been working with the RMM for 5.5. Which one's going to take precedence, right? And our lines got crossed there. It ended up that we had to have a phone call today to fix this problem rather than doing it over email, because the two of us were speaking a slightly different language. Right? Same thing falls into documentation. Have a template, have a process, have a procedure. Right? This goes into ticketing. This goes into time entries. This goes into not just SOPs. Everything you do with documentation should be standardized, and if you need to, create templates. Okay. So when it comes to these processes, some things to consider are, first off, is your ticket workflow documented in some fashion? If not, it's a great place to start. It's the first thing people are going to look at when you're going up for valuation is, can you tell me how you do your day to day? Right? And then show me. Right? Do you have processes in place to make sure an issue gets to the best resource? Going back to, I don't know a PSA out there that I've worked with that doesn't have the ability to assign tickets by workload and or skills. Are we looking for keywords inside our tickets to make sure the right person gets it? And then what happens if you had a tech leave? Your tier 3 security tech Johnny gets a little bit fed up, right, with your end users. He just doesn't want to deal with small businesses, and corporate America offered him a metric ton of money to go be a security analyst. We'd be very happy for John that he got career growth, right? We should never be unhappy for employees leaving, unless we have to fire them for some reason. If you want firing stories, we could talk about my Men's Warehouse time. But funny stories aside, right? We're always happy for career growth. But when he leaves, where does his knowledge go? Is it in a trusted repository so we can look at hiring another security analyst, or maybe getting Jane to take over some of his responsibilities? Or is it all stuck in his head and we're up a creek without a paddle because we're telling Jane, well, we lost our security person. You've got to go and pick up some of the slack. I don't know how he did his job. Neither do you. Right? Easy things to consider. Documentation management is a time sink. Okay. I love this statistic here in that without documentation, the technicians on average waste 30% of their time searching for information. In a $2 million MSP, that means you're losing $75K per year by not documenting properly. What could you do with $75K if we implement this efficiency? Right? That's another salesperson. Maybe not all over the commission, I hope, but pretty darn close. That's a tier 1 tech in the base salary of a salesperson. Security analyst. Well, almost, right? 75K is a lot of money. That's a whole new marketing campaign. Plus, you want to be really nice to your field tech, that 75K is a plush vehicle for service calls, right? Probably not what we want to spend money on, but 75K, chunk of change. Okay. When we come to processes, okay, first things first, as a business owner, you're not the first one to go through this problem, and you almost never will be with the problems that arise. Please don't reinvent the wheel. Okay. Your PSM has resources for you. Enable has resources for you. My email is joseph.ferla@enable.com. If you ever want to have a conversation about this, I'm more than happy to do so. Okay. I did this boot camp this morning. I've now got a 2-hour session set up with one of the MSPs that we were working with because we're going to go over some dashboard auditing best practices. We're going to go over some automation efficiency best practices, and we're going to look at how inside his organization that he just took over, right, that he admittedly says looks like a rat's nest, where do we target his efforts first and best? Right? I'll love to have that conversation with one of you guys. You're not the first, you won't be the last. Right? So use the resources as you will. Okay. And then once this is in place, please let's not rediscover information. And what I mean by that is let's train our techs to use our KB. I don't need Johnny and Jane every time they have to do a specific task going and Googling how to do it. I should have Googled it once and then documented it as an SOP and put it in a repository that has a reasonable search. Right. Sample process of escalations here. What we would see is we just sheerly auto escalate certain types of tickets. If I see backup in a ticket title, it goes to my backup tech, and that's probably tier 2. If I have a tier 1 backup tech, that's very nice. You're probably working for a larger MSP, right? If I see certain end users come in, might need to go to specific technicians. Okay. Then we have our research limits on top of our escalations. Okay. Ticket comes in, tier 1 tech has spent 30 minutes trying to figure out what the problem is and how to solve it, can't do it, goes up to tier 2. Tier 2 spends 30 to 60 minutes trying to figure out how to solve it and what the actual root cause is. And if they can't, tier 3. Now, our eventual goal is that 75% of our tickets are solved at tier 1, but that escalation process has to be in place, which then leads us to escalation reviews and training, right? Tier 1 tech Jason, why are 50% of your tickets getting tiered up to tier 2? Oh, you've never worked with Max before. Okay, let's go do some training and certification courses. Max got some free ones that are pretty darn good, right? Determine where continuing education is. If you guys don't have continuing education as a part of your organizational culture, you should. All right, automation. We wow, okay, that got hard. We're gonna back up. English is, I swear to God, my first language. All right, we've talked a lot about automation today. We've talked about where it fits in each of these, right? Assessments, onboarding, custom monitoring, proactive maintenance, self-healing, right? And we kind of hit on the fact that inside an RM, the Insight RMM and in Central, if you're using those tools, we have what's called the Automation Manager. It pumps out Automation Manager policies or AMP files. It's a drag and drop GUI interface that allows you to script without knowing how to script. I will openly and boldly admit I am intermediate at best with PowerShell. However, inside the real world with my small little MSP, I was able to hit that 75% automation mark because I utilized the automation manager. I didn't have to know how to do most scripting. I just had to know how to search what I wanted to do. Right? Proactive maintenance or monthly maintenance inside there consisted of about a combination of 6 objects. Create a prompt to make sure I can go ahead and run it and not interrupting a day. An if else statement based off of that click result. A clean manager, defrag, restart, and then check for patches. I didn't script any of it. I clicked and I dragged and I dropped. Right? So using the resources at hand, right? Don't reinvent the wheel. Okay. So when we look at automation and we look at being efficient here, where we start to drive this home with our team is, first off, as a business owner, do I let my technicians do this? Your technicians are the best resource you're going to have to target automation. Go to your tier one techs, ask them what the most annoying thing that they deal with on a daily basis is, and they'll give you a top 20. Go through that top 20, and if you can automate, do it. Right? Tell them, ask them what the most common tickets that they deal with are. Not what the most annoying is, but the most common. They'll give you a top million, right? Take the top 10, automate them. Okay. If you're not talking to your employees or setting aside time for them to focus on automation, automation never gets done. Okay. And you can justify it very easily. I'm going to put my tier 3 and my tier 2 tech and my or tier 3 and a tier 1 tech in a room for an hour, and I'm going to have them come up with the top 10 items that they need to automate. You have the one who's talking to your clients the most and the one who's dealing with your products problem the most, right? If each one of those 10 items takes an hour to 3 hours to automate, so 10 to 30 hours worth of work from that tier 3 tech plus the hour meeting, so 31 max, and you can deploy 15 minutes worth of saving per month across 100, 200 devices, it pays for itself, right? If you could deploy it to 1,000 devices, not the largest MSP, not the smallest MSP, it paid for itself yesterday. Okay. Set aside the time. If you're not setting aside the time to automate as a part of your culture, we need to be looking at doing it. Okay. And worst come to worst, we need some education on it. We have boot camps for it. Beginner, intermediate, and advanced automation manager boot camps, beginner and intermediate PowerShell, how to best automate inside the RMM, how to best automate inside and central. 15 things you should already have automated. 15 more things you should automate. Right? Can't tell Mark Andre's a little bit Douglas Adams with those two 15 things meetings, but hey, they're very valuable. Okay. And I think we've all gotten the benefits of automation at this point. If we need to review that left-hand part of the slide, I think I have failed you in our webinar, right? One thing we didn't hit on, okay, that we will quite quickly is humans are really good at hearing what they're supposed to do and doing something else. It's just the nature of what we are. Computers are really good at telling us to do exactly what we tell them to. I can't tell you how many times I've screamed at my computer in a tech world or an IT support world, do what I want you to, not what I'm telling you to. Right? Because that's what they do. Standardizing your process is just exceptional. Right? This by some estimates, I don't like the by some estimates here. Okay? I am by no means the best at scripting or automation. I was able to hit 60%. If I can do it, I guarantee that you folks who have been in the tech world longer than me, who have technicians who have been in the tech world longer than I've probably been alive, for Pete's sakes, right? You guys are better at it. 60% is achievable. But remember, it's not just self-healing and checks and tasks, right? It is also, have you automated patching? It's 15 minutes a week a device. Sounds like you hit 10% of your service delivery there, or maybe a larger or lower percentage, but 10% is one I'm going to pull out of thin air. That sounds good. Are you automating your managed antivirus remediation and scanning? Here's like 1% that you've automated, but you've got it automated. It's not just checks and tasks. It's not just scripting. But that's where we put the emphasis on during these conversations, because I walk into this conversation assuming that you've already got the table stakes of automated patch. right? If we don't, why are we purchasing an RMM tool? Right? We need to have a much bigger conversation. All right. Last couple slides here. We'll open up for questions and we'll get a couple housekeeping items out of the way. Okay. This incentive section. I like this because I get to see MSPs be really creative with this. Incentivize your technicians, your engineers to automate and document. Okay. The more you incentivize behavior around best practices, the better. A bounty program is really good for automation, right? Some type of internal reward. The tier of technicians that adheres to the SLAs the best over the next quarter gets to go to what? Well, actually, I'll tell you what we did. We did this thing called Boxcar in Durham, North Carolina, and Raleigh. There are two bars owned by the same people called Boxcar. They're barcades. The PSM team that brought the most people to Empower got a Boxcar night for free. Right. There were limits there. I think it was $75 a head. Right. But you get $20 worth of tickets and you get $30 worth of drinks. You're doing pretty good. Right. That's a fun night. Right. And then you have what, $20 to $30 left over to go across the street to the food trucks or to the barbecue joint and get a good dinner. It's not a bad night. Right. My favorite bounty I've ever seen, just because I would have never in a million years thought of this. One MSP that we worked with found out that you could lease a 5 Series BMW for $500 a month. Now, I do believe he worked with the car dealership that BMW was leased from, but nonetheless, right? His incentive program was if over the quarter you automated the most hours of automation, you got to drive the BMW for the next quarter. It doesn't have to be a BMW there, but that's pretty cool, right? Gift cards to nice restaurants, right? Swag, right? Doesn't even have to be your guys' swag. Another MSP I worked with worked in the Boston area, right? I think we can all say that New England fans are the most fanatical fans when it comes to being a fanatic, right? So their bounty was, depending on what quarter, was a first level ticket to that sporting event. One person in the organization got it, right? Be it a Celtics game, be it a Bruins game, be it a Red Sox game, or a Pats game, right? Play into the culture. Okay, incentives are always there, and they help you build this culture, right, around innovation and automation. Right. What does best in class do differently? Right. I think yet again, another slide here that we're going to quickly rehash because we should know this. Okay. We are efficiently measuring against our KPIs. We are constantly looking for ways to reduce wasted time. We are continuously educating and educating our staff to reduce escalations and reworks. Right? We are scheduling time to work on automation. For those of us who are small MSPs, we're not big $20 million MSPs. We're small 10 people shops, 5 people shops. I love this stat here at the end of our presentation. 10 minutes per day for 5 technicians equals 5.5 weeks per year. That's an extra about 32 hours worth of a week, right? 150, 140. 140 extra hours you can get out of your employees to do something like more automation or efficiency work. It's not bad. It's not bad at all. Next step's pretty easy. Take what you've learned today, fit it to your organization, take the KPIs, let's just start to utilize them. Okay. As a business owner, manager, or C-suite member, your time today for these 2.5 hours was too valuable to walk out of here with nothing. Even if you were answering emails on the side, taking something from today, even if it was just the KPIs and implementing it into your organization, is 2 hours well spent. Alrighty, folks, it was a pleasure today, and I hope to see you in some of our future boot camps. Bye-bye.